In an age where conspiracy theories abound, facts are routinely distorted and amplified, and distrust is becoming the default, there are distinct gaps in our knowledge about why this is happening. Curtin University is attempting to unravel this unsettling 21st century reality with the establishment of an Extremism Research Network. The network's co-director, Dr. Ben Rich, is with us now. Ben, let's start with that, the premise of why cultural extremism is on the rise. What's driving it?
Well, it's a complex question. I think what we're seeing is a sort of a confluence of factors, whether we look at widespread social alienation and the sort of mental health crisis that has really emerged since COVID-19. I think people are increasingly feeling very alienated and isolated from their societies, and in that kind of space, we can get these kind of malevolent actors that are, exploiting that towards their particular ends. We see this especially in the case of sort of far right and sort of conspiracy theory groups around that. We also have the sort of dominance of the digital in our lives now. So to sort of add an extra layer to that alienation, people can now go online and find, thriving communities that are based around these kind of conspiratorial ideas, and have those kind of alternative realities really reinforced and legitimated for them in a way that really wasn't possible a generation ago. When we had to sort of live much more in the material world. The salience of these ideas really got filtered out quite a lot more due to the sort of range of people and the sort of complexities of the societies you lived in. You had to deal with all sorts of different people with different views, but the internet has allowed for this kind of homogenization of ideas in which, creating spaces in which these ideas really aren't contested, are indeed reinforced and said to be, the accurate way of looking at the world.
If we could talk more about COVID-19 and its place in this, with vaccines, lockdowns, violent protests, geopolitical upheaval and shifting messages from the authorities along the journey, it did become a hotbed for conspiracies. Did it tease out underlying tensions in the West, or was it in the catalyst of a movement?
Oh, absolutely. I think what the effects of COVID-19 was to really bring out a lot of the contradictions in our societies and our economy, in our relationship between citizen and state that had kind of been simmering away for quite a long time. We can trace this back to things like the GFC, the increasing precarity of work for many, many workers. And so in that kind of space where that uncertainty has really come to the fore, you get a lot of groups who have had, long-term agendas around things like ethno-nationalism, eco-fascism, seeing an opportunity to kind of step into the gap, to kind of push their agendas and point to the uncertainties of COVID-19 as a sort of illustrating, their particular viewpoints. You can't trust the government. The government's incompetent. And the basic sort of social contract is breaking down, and as a result, you need to look to these more extreme world views that offer really the only way out of that.
From your team's work so far, what do you believe we should be most concerned about when it comes to extreme views?
What we're really seeing is a rise of far-right, neo-reactionary sentiment that is much more chaotic than the kind of traditional sort of neo-Nazi stereotypes that we're used to. We use the term today salad bar ideologies, in which people who get involved in these kind of movements and sort of almost a zeitgeist, they're often not even an organized movement, but they're able to kind of pick and choose various aspects of ideological structures. So they might take a bit of ecology and eco-fascism, they might take a bit of extreme socialism and sort of social contract theory, and they kind of package it all into this weird amalgam that doesn't look like the kind of hierarchical ideologies of old, but at the same time allows for a much broader capture of potential individuals to be drawn into these kind of extremist thought patterns, and potentially, further on down the line, come to view violence as a legitimate means of redressing those grievances.
Well, extremism does look different then. So what does history tell us about the rise of extremism? What fuels it, and what are the likely outcomes?
Well, I think we can understand from history that extremism emerges during times of great uncertainty and change. And I think we are going to be experiencing that, extensively over the next 10, 20, 30 years. We have a number of, factors in a sort of the global system at the moment that have really uprooted any sense of a sort of a normal life for many people. And I think particularly for young people, I sort of see this a lot with the students I teach and the young people coming up, and this kind of sense of despair. I think the effects of climate change in terms of people movement, refugees, in terms of the stresses and strains on supply chains, I think is going to make our society feel a lot more chaotic and send a lot more people out there searching for meaning and increasingly looking in more and more extreme spaces, which will simultaneously be enabled by the growth of complex digital communities and pathways. And I think we're really going to be, for the foreseeable future, struggling to kind of try and keep up with all this complexity, because it is an increasingly complex system, and I think the complexity will only grow exponentially.
In attempting to interpret the signals and behaviours driving cultural extremism, what disciplines have you brought together at the Curtin Extremism Research Network?
Yeah, so we're a really multidisciplinary group. We have a wide array of people from across the university and a few people from outside of it. So we've got linguists, we've got people who practice in business and law, we've got people in education, we've got philosophers, we've got health science people. We've got, of course, the kind of classic, sort of international relations, terrorism studies kind of people. But what we've really tried to focus on here is creating a more kind of diverse culture of practice around this, with the idea being that these issues are intrinsically multidisciplinary in their challenges. And one of the real, I would say, issues in historically studying this kind of field is that it's often really been the purview of a very specific subset of disciplines in spaces like psychology and international relations. And I think that can often lead to a